Shalom, Debbie G here from End of Time Prophecy channel here on YouTube. And today is part 1 of our new study about the covenant. It was a couple of months ago I heard two sisters sharing their view on the covenant. And as I was listening, I was intrigued, of course, by what they were saying. But then I started to study it myself. And then all of a sudden, it was like the Lord opened my eyes for the importance of this study. And as I started to dig in, I found more and more. And I finally realized it's so incredibly important to know in which covenant you and I are living. Because recently I heard Jacob Press say, God only made a covenant with Israel, with Abram, and therefore their future is kind of different. But as I would like to show you guys, God didn't start a covenant just with Abram. It starts with a universal covenant. So I hope you will join me in my study about the importance of the covenant. Well, as we all know, when God created the earth, as we can read in Genesis 1 and 2, he made man after his image. Very important to remember that part. And now when Adam and Eve were made, they were placed in the Garden of Eden, where they were given dominion to rule. They were to rule over all the animals in order to expand this little Eden into the whole earth. Now in that same garden, God made a covenant. This covenant was given to those who are made after his image to keep them safe. Now, if they would break the covenant, of course, there would be consequences. Now, this covenant in the Garden of Eden is kind of like the initial promise that will be fulfilled in the end of the world. Just like Noah, again, this covenant is a universal covenant, because back in the days, God hasn't chosen Abram and his people yet. So therefore, the first 2 covenants are universal covenants. And we will see the last one will be a universal covenant as well. So even though people don't live as if they are in a covenant with the Creator himself made a covenant with mankind. And therefore, all of mankind, all who are made after his image, are bound to it through the covenants he made with Adam and Noah. And his promise was for the entire world is that a seed would come from the line of the woman to destroy the enemy. For God so loved the world. And that even though how wicked people will be, he will not destroy the earth again with a flood. So again, the promise doesn't start with Abram and only his literal descendants. It starts with the first Adam, and it will end with the triumphant coming of the second Adam. Let's have a look at the word covenant. Berit in Hebrew. It occurs 284 times within the Old Testament. And as you can see, there's a whole list of meanings, but we're just going to cover the ones where it deals between God and man, which is an alliance of friendship that he's closing. It is a covenant of divine ordinance with signs or pledges. So that is what we're going to study. Again, covenant number 1 is between Yah and Adam. Again, this is the universal covenant. We call it the Edenic covenant. And as you can see, every covenant has 3 parts in it. Sometimes it's in your face. Sometimes you have to dig a little deeper. But if you look closely, these 3 are there, which is divine benevolence, human loyalty, and consequences, good or bad, according to the blessings and the curses. Although some teach that God didn't make covenant with Adam because the word covenant isn't in it, if you read Genesis 1, 2, and 3, you see these 3 elements within these chapters. So therefore, I do believe that the first covenant was made with Adam. Second is, if you read Hosea 6 verse 7, it affirms that there was a covenant made with Adam. And secondly, if you read Genesis 6 verse 18, which is the Noah verse, it reads, I will establish my covenant with you. Now the word establish is the Hebrew kum, and it's translated establish, but it would be better to have been translated confirm, because that's what it means. Confirm as in continue, because if you see in Genesis 6, God is continuing the covenant he once started with Adam. He's continuing it with Noah. And that is how the covenant principle works. One covenant would be built upon the previous one. And so in a sense, the covenant with Adam is the foundational covenant. The origin of the royal priesthood is found in Genesis. It's found with Adam and Eve. We see that Adam and Eve were like kings and priests taking care of Eden and what was in it. But they were also to spread these blessings all over the world. They were given dominion over every living being on earth. Why were they kings, you might ask? Well, you can also call them royal representatives, because you need to realize that Eden was sacred space. Eden was the habitation of God himself. Eden was, in a sense, the tabernacle. It was the temple where God lived. And therefore, they were serving the King of Kings. So, again, Eden was sacred space because God lived there, and man had to work in it and take care of it. Now, the word work, Hebrew abad, means to work and to serve God with Levitical service. So you see, it's the same word that the writer used here in Genesis 2, as well as in Numbers 3 verse 8, where the Levites had to work and take care of the tabernacle. Do you see the similarity? Later on, the Levites would be called to serve in the tabernacle. Back in the days with Adam and Eve, Eden was like a tabernacle. Eden was like the temple because Yah lived there. And so therefore, they were serving as priest, as royal priest to the king. When you think about the tabernacle, if you look closely, you see that everything in the tabernacle reminds of Eden. Because we see the cherubim, which we see in Eden as well. We see the candlestick, which is a reminder of the tree of life. We see, like, for instance, the blue veil in the tabernacle, which is a reminder of the sky. But also, if you look at the ephod of the high priest and the breastplate he was wearing with all the precious stones, we see the same stones in Genesis 2. Even you read more stones in Ezekiel 28 with the fall of Lucifer, who was a cherubim who walked in Eden. He also was covered with precious stones. So hence, that's the reason why, again, everything you see in the tabernacle is a reminder of what was lost in a sense. So back to Adam. We see the creation of Adam and where Adam was put, which is in a garden, which is in the land of Eden. We see it on the screen, Genesis 2, verse 16. They were there to dress it and to keep it. Now the word keep is shamar, and it means to keep or to have charge of. And whenever you see this word shamar, you will read it with something that has to do with keeping either my covenant, which you can read in Genesis 17. It either has to deal with keeping my commandments in Genesis 26, or keeping a certain day, Sabbath day, in Exodus 12. So Whenever you see the word keep, it's an order from God. It's an order from Yah. Now, the original situation was, if you, Adam, stay away from the tree of good and evil, you will be mine, and you will forever live with me in my house, my angelic host. Together we will all live as a family on this earth. So again, the covenant principle is divine benevolence, human loyalty, and consequences, good or bad. Yah is saying, I'm your God, you are my people, I will give you land where we can stay together forever. Again, with the human family and the heavenly family. They were all living on earth in Eden back then. But we know the story. Adam and Eve broke the covenant by failing the test of loyalty. And why is loyalty so important? Because loyalty it shows the conditions of a person's heart. So they lost the garden, they lost Eden, they lost the fact that Yah tabernacled amongst them, along with their heavenly family. And from that moment on, two things happen. First of all, Yah and his angelic host withdraw from the earth. In a sense, the Bible shows that God lives in heaven. Back then in Eden, heaven was on earth. In Revelation 21:22, it will be on earth again. But because of the fall of Adam and Eve, heaven and the heavenly host had to withdraw and become separate from the earth. The second thing we see is that God would do every effort to call back his people who are made after his image. And thank God, a second Adam would come to reverse the curse. You can also read Psalm 72 from verse 8 till 17, where it talks about King Solomon. But also it's a beautiful prophecy about the king who would come to redeem it all. Now, it would take approximately 1650 years for God to make another covenant with another man. Covenant number 2 is the one between Yah and Noah. Again, we need to remember it's the universal covenant built upon the previous one. We all know the situation in Genesis 6. Mankind was so wicked that he had to blot out mankind. And not just all who were made after his image, but every other creature, living creature as well. So we see the covenant promise in Genesis 6 verse 17. It says, everything that is in the earth shall die, but with thee, Noah, will I continue my covenant. And thou shalt come into the ark, you, your sons, your wives. Well, you know the drill. But do you see the terms as in the test of loyalty, as in Noah, you're going to make the ark and you have to go inside the ark. I can only imagine what would have happened if Noah didn't, which would have been awful, because out of the line of Noah would come the promised seed. So in chapter 9, we see that God blessed Noah and his sons, and he said, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. There's the repetition of the same words he spoke to Adam and Eve. That is the benevolence of God, the goodness of God. He gives humankind a second chance. Verse 3 says, everything that lives and moves will be for food, just as I've given you the green plants I now give you. But you must not eat meat with its lifeblood in it. There you see the food thing again, loyalty thing again. And then in verse 6 and 9 you see whoever, so mankind, sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. So the consequence is, if you kill somebody, if you murder someone, you have to give life for a life. And I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you. So you see, this universal covenant is made with all mankind. And murder, as you can see, in the end, I will share how the 10 Commandments were there in the beginning and not just from the time of Moses. But that's another topic for the future. This covenant has a specific sign, as we know, that's the rainbow. You can read it in verse 12 and 13. I do set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a token of a covenant between me and the earth. So it's not so much covenant between God and mankind. No, he promises the earth that it will not be flooded all over again. The word, I will say a token, is the same word as sign. It's the Hebrew word oath, and it means a sign, a banner, or it can mean a remembrance. And this is what it is, of course. So we see the universal covenant because, again, this promise is given to all of mankind. And in a sense, we see the covenant principle of God who blesses the people, gives them a new earth, even though he knows our propensity to sin. This is how much he loves us. For God so loved the world. We also see that God shows blessings and common grace for all humanity. There's a difference, but first of all, if you read Matthew 5 verse 45, it says, "For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust." Psalm 145:9 says, "The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works." But again, there's a difference between common grace, as we have seen in the previous verses, which is for all people, and there's saving grace, which is for believers. There you go. This is part 1 of our study about the covenant. We have seen that God made a covenant with Adam and with Noah. These are universal covenants, and as we will see in the next video, we will continue our search about the covenant, because we're going to look at the covenant which God made with Abram and his sons. I hope this was a blessing to you. I hope and pray you will continue to pray about these topics. I pray you will like the video, subscribe to my channel, but most of all, share it with your loved ones, share it with those who need to hear these words, because we need to prep God's people for the coming of the second Adam. And therefore, please keep me in your prayers. Do share your questions and comments. You can send an email to endoftimeprophecy@gmail.com or just leave a comment below. Yah willing, I'll see you next time for part 2. Shalom.